Connecticut is home to many trees, but few have shaped its forests, its wildlife, its shipyards, and its history quite like one species, Quercus alba, more commonly known as the white oak. Long before our nation existed, this tree was already standing and has been quietly present throughout everything. With the right care, it will be standing still long after us. Some trees live a single human lifetime, others outlast nations. The white oak belongs to the second category. This is a tree that can stand for centuries, silently present for the wildlife that shelters in its bark, the people who rest in its shade, and the history that unfolds beneath its canopy. To understand what that really means, you have to be in the presence of one.
We're visiting a site on UConn forest where there's some very ancient white oak trees. The history of this site is that the middle 1700s, this area had been cleared and turned into pasture. At about that time, these old trees were probably saplings. In counting the rings on this tree, we felt like it was more than 250 years old, which means that this tree was here at the time of the American Revolution. Probably a small pasture tree at that time, and serving to provide shade source for this site. The university used this area as pasture land for a while, but in the last 60 or 70 years, the pasture was abandoned and trees grew up in the old pasture. A mixture of oaks, ash, maple, birch, a little bit of elm, all surrounding this big white oak tree and beginning to take up the crown space that this tree occupied, presenting a bit of competition for the old tree. In the last few years, we've had a loss of some of the ash in this stand because of emerald ash borer, and that began to open up the canopy a little bit. And our forest crew has been busily working at eliminating some of the other competition around the crown of this big old tree, just with the idea of giving it a bit more crown space and better chance to get the sunlight that it needs in order to continue to survive. In Connecticut, there's two broad categories of oak trees. There's the white oaks and the red oaks. And there are several species of white oaks, and there are several species of red oak. We recognize white oak and members of the white oak group because they have leaves that have lobes, and the lobes are rounded at the tip. Like all oak trees, they'll have a cluster of buds at the end of the growing season, and the buds are kind of blunt. They're not sharply pointed. White oak leaves can be quite variable, but the characteristic you can trust is that they always have rounded lobes. Red oaks, on the other hand, have lobes that are pointed. The bud cluster is comprised of buds that are also more sharply pointed than we find on the white oak.
The white oak's generosity begins in autumn, with a crop that nearly every animal in the northeastern forest has learned to depend on. But for many of us, this annual feast goes entirely unnoticed.
Everything loves acorns. The birds eat them, the squirrels eat them, the chipmunks eat them, the deer eat them, the turkeys eat them, the turtles eat them, and the white oak acorns happen to be the sweetest acorns. The white oak acorn normally drops without the cap. It's a nut that's kind of oval-shaped or egg-shaped, if you will, a little bit elongated. Notice this one is starting to germinate already. And that's one of the things that we know about white oak trees. The tree flowers in the springtime and becomes pollinated. The acorn forms, grows, and matures and germinates all in one growing season. In the fall, the acorns drop, and the ones that are viable will send out a little root radical that gets into the soil that begins the germination process.
Today on UConn Forest, the Fenton Tract, is Mr. Peter Picone, who's a wildlife biologist with the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. So when you think about white oaks, what are the animals you think about first?
So the white oak is the seed that is sought after by mostly white-tailed deer, turkey, squirrels, obviously. As soon as they start falling, it is the one that they seek for first in the fall.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Connecticut Audubon Society's Deer Pond Farm Nature Preserve in Sherman, Connecticut. I'm Kathy Hagedorn, the director of this amazing new nature preserve.
My name is Lori Lichtenauer and I'm the sanctuary manager and naturalist at Deer Pond Farm. And I'm so excited to talk about one of my favorite tree species, the white oaks. Acorns are one of the most important food sources for lots of different wildlife species. These acorns from the white oak trees are also the favorite out of all of the different types of acorns because they have fewer tannins in them, which can possibly make them taste sweeter.
I like to remind people that it can sometimes take an oak tree 20 to 30 years before it starts producing acorns. That's a really long time. People want instant gratification in this day and age. This tree has patience, perseverance, persistence. So if you have one acorn today, think about what that's going to be like 100 years from now.
Not only do these trees have an important history in the state of Connecticut, but if you're a birder, this should be your favorite tree.
Oaks are the keystone species, meaning they are the backbone to the forest.
Imagine a world without birds. Imagine a world without the butterflies. Imagine going to a park and you don't have a shady canopy on these hot summer days.
You know, it's very valuable to keep that ecosystem thriving with biodiversity here in the Northeast.
The different species of oak trees all produce abundant crops or bumper crops of acorns on different cycles. Some of them, it's every couple of years they have an abundant acorn crop. Some it's every 5 years. Some species it's every 10 years. Every now and then, all the cycles hit their high point together. And we see a year with so many acorns, it's hard to believe that there would be so many. And this has an influence on populations of birds and other wildlife.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see the population numbers, waxing and waning as we see big population boons in one year due to something like a mast year, then that population is still going to, some individuals will die from natural causes, but then you've got this really high population and the next year might not be a mast year.
Oak trees do not make the same number of acorns each year. So when scientists talk about there being a mast year, that's a very good productive year for the oak trees to kind of have their flowers, have their acorns. And there's so many variables. I'm always learning, as Lori's talking about, there could be a really big storm in the springtime that could kind of wash away all the pollen. So the flowers from the oak trees don't get to make acorns. There could be drought. There could be so many other variables. So when we kind of look at the forest floor, that might be telling us, what was the weather like? What were the past weather systems like? What's the health of the trees? And then this is going to be an indicator for rodents. So whenever there's a mast year, there's probably going to be an increase on the chipmunks and the squirrels. That feeds the fox, that feeds the coyote. So these things ebb and flow, they wax and wane, and there's so many variables. I love that it's kind of, bust or boom kind of thing, so that the tree isn't putting all of its resources every year to make the same amount of food. And I think that's also a benefit, but sometimes a challenge for birds as well. If it's a mast year or not, that definitely can have an impact for the birds that you were talking about. And I wonder if we can clarify too the term mast. What technically is mast? How do scientists talk about a hard mast versus something like a soft mast, maybe like cherry trees? Oh, fantastic. Look at this, a buffet of nuts.
So right, yeah, hard mast refers to things like nuts. So hickory trees produce nuts, beech trees produce nuts, and acorns come from oak trees. So all of those different things that can be eaten by wildlife, that is called hard mast. And so soft mast can also be things like fruit. So black cherry trees, black tupelo trees have fruit on them. And so this is more of the fruit we think of in the traditional sense. It's soft and fleshy and it has a lot of rich carbohydrates for wildlife. And the hard mast can provide a lot of fat and a lot of carbohydrates as well. So that's really important for, during the winter time, the animals need to be building as much fat as possible, getting their fat stores up so that they can survive the winter.
If you were a bird or an animal, what kind of things do you think you would look for?
Oaks are one of the most productive producers of different types of moths and caterpillars. And caterpillars are sort of the engine that runs the bird world during the summer and fall.
You mean that the birds depend on the caterpillars as a food source when they're raising?
They're young.
Yeah, they're young. Oh,
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and an oak is very good at providing that food source. You won't notice it much because the native caterpillars kind of have a relationship with the oak, and they'll eat some of it, but the birds that end up foraging on it keep it in check. Pileated woodpeckers might go after the carpenter ants. There's a brown creeper that might go up and pick off insect casings. The bark has lots of nooks and crannies. Birds can find all kinds of overwintering pupa. Like the kinglet will be feeding on a variety of insects that are still overwintering. So they're doing the work even in the winter, picking off insect life, providing a service.
You will notice that this tree has been visited by someone. These holes are made from a yellow-bellied sapsucker. These birds will drill these tiny holes into the tree in these rows. And so what they're doing is they're drinking the sap. And then a lot of the times when the sap is coming down out of the tree, other bugs will be attracted to that sap. And these birds basically get a 2-for-1 snack. They get their sugary carbohydrates, and they also get their protein from all the bugs that are attracted to that sap.
A classic bird that loves to eat the bugs that found from oaks are the chickadee. They could use thousands of caterpillars to feed a brood. Picture a chickadee picking off many different bugs off of the oaks, but then they're also foraging potentially on seeds, leftover seeds from the spring, from the winter into the spring.
Not all white oaks grow the same way. The conditions in which a tree grows shape everything about what it becomes and what it has to offer.
Behind me here, we have an amazing white oak tree that has been alive for a very, very long time because there's been a lot of care put into this tree. It's been cared for by arborists and also by the previous property owners of Deer Pond Farm, Kathy and Walter Riston. So they were always on the cutting edge and trying to take care of these trees because at every life stage, they provide ecosystem services as they are young, as an acorn, that's a great food source for wildlife. But as these trees get older, they can provide even more ecosystem services. So the way that this tree is growing, the knots, all the gnarls, and all of the things that kind of make it not really great for timber, make it an amazing wildlife tree. So a tree like this white oak, is not only providing a lot of seed source for other white oak trees like you can see growing right in front of me right here and all around us. This tree is basically acting like a parent tree to the next generation of white oaks.
So the advantage to having some large trees on your property is for denning. You look up there, there's some pretty good holes in this tree. The den sites can be long range, squirrels, flying squirrels. I've seen these larger oaks that have large cavities. Bears will actually get inside them, raccoons as well. The dead and dying limbs that are horizontal, they're going to be obviously good for woodpeckers. Nuthatches are going to obviously pick off the bugs out of the bark. For birds, I would say that the owls benefit the most, to have a safe cavity that they could overwinter in, and not just safe, but free from the elements.
So these wolf oak trees, having really old trees, can provide a lot of different ecosystem services over the course of their entire lifetime. So if these trees are living to be over 400 years old, think about all of the wildlife it's fed, all of the different trees that it's become the parent of, and all the different insects that it's housed and has really provided for over the years.
Lori described this tree as a wolf tree. And this is a term that foresters use to describe a tree that takes up a lot of space. It isn't necessarily that wolves use the tree. But this tree had its beginning growing in the open and developed a very spreading kind of architecture in order to take advantage of as much sunlight as it had. Probably at the time, the rest of the land around here was being used as pasture land, and cows were grazing or horses or sheep were grazing and used this tree for shade. Since the time this was abandoned pasture, new trees have grown up, many of which are offspring of this tree, like Lori says, and she pointed out this seedling. But if you angle the camera over in that direction there's a couple of trees you see, much larger trees with sunlight on them. Those are probably also offspring of this tree and have been there for 50 or 60 years. And so while we might have a 15-year-old seedling here, we also have a 50 or 60-year-old offspring there from this much, much older tree.
A white oak that has lived long enough becomes something more than just a tree. It becomes a landmark, a thing they name, a place people return to, a living marker of time. Sometimes you can even find history itself within one.
When we're trying to identify trees in the wintertime, we don't have the leaves to go by, which is the thing that most people rely on for their identification purposes. But we can use winter characteristics, namely the twigs and the buds, and if we have it, the fruit of the plant to identify it. The white oak, for example, the terminal buds are larger, and these are more rounded buds and come in a cluster at the tip of the twig. For white oak, Quercus alba, white oak being our state tree. We have a question.
Yes, is this a white oak right here when it's fully grown?
This is a white oak, an ancient white oak, and you can also tell that from the color of the bark. That light gray color kind of stands out in the wintertime. And
has very thick bark.
And well, that's a thick bark because it's an old tree.
Huh. Why is it the state tree, Tom?
Well, that goes back quite a ways in history. In 1662, the British Crown granted the colony of Connecticut a charter that would allow it to be self-governing and autonomous. 25 years later, in 1687, the Crown decided they wanted the charter back. And so they sent a delegation to the various colonies to collect the charters that they had given out. When they came to Connecticut, to Hartford, there was a big meeting where they were going to collect the charter. And during the course of the meeting, somebody blew out the candles. And when the room was lit up again, the charter was gone. The charter had disappeared. And we're told that Captain Wadsworth took the charter and hid it in the cavity of an ancient hollow white oak tree. And the Crown of Britain was never able to collect the charter after all, and Connecticut kept its charter. And that tree went down in history known as the charter oak. And the charter oak happened to be a white oak tree. The charter itself went on to become the foundational document for the U.S. Constitution and the state constitution, and that's why Connecticut is known as the Constitution State.
Oh wow, this one's got a hollow too. There's something in here.
Something in there?
Yeah, what the heck is this?
What'd you find?
I don't know. It's your job.
Look at this. Oh my goodness. I think it's another copy of the charter.
The white oak became, quite literally, a symbol of Connecticut's freedom and the foundation of a nation's idea of self-governance. The original charter oak fell in 1856, but Connecticut is not a state that lets go of its trees easily. In Hartford's Bushnell Park, a scion of that famous tree still stands, and the people who care for it know exactly why it's worth taking care of.
I'm Amanda Bunce. I'm a forest researcher at UConn.
My name's Danica Jarosky. I am the State Urban and Community Forestry Coordinator for Connecticut. I work within the Division of Forestry at Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. And in this role, I manage a statewide technical and financial assistance program. My program works with municipalities, nonprofit organizations, community groups, really anyone who's interested in growing and maintaining their urban and community forest.
So we know that the urban forest canopy, the vegetation and green spaces and trees around where we work and live, is important for hiding documents. Can you tell us what are some other values and the importance of the urban forest canopy?
Definitely. So I'll back up for a minute and just kind of describe what the urban forest is. I think it's a term that not a lot of people are familiar with, but ironically, urban forests are actually the trees that most of us are encountering in our daily lives, right? These are the trees that line our streets, that shade our parks and our schoolyards, that fill our backyards, and they are part of the infrastructure in our urban area. So just like roads and bridges, trees are filling critical functions in our cities. They help mitigate extreme heat. They can help manage some of the flooding issues that we observe in our cities. Trees absorb air pollutants, and so they really do a big part to make our cities healthier, safer, and more livable. Benefits of trees are not limited to just those environmental services. Trees, like the ones we're standing underneath in Bushnell Park, create a welcoming and shaded space for people to gather. And that translates to a lot of health and social benefits. So for me, what really brought me to this field and got me interested in urban forestry is the way that urban trees connect people in cities to nature and the really strong attachments that people form to the trees in their neighborhoods.
So this is a really specific tree. This one is a scion of the charter oak. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think white oak specifically has as a value in the urban forest?
Not just white oaks, but oak as a genus is our go-to species for shade trees in the urban environment. Most cities are looking to oaks when they're looking to plant a long-lived, large-statured, broad-canopied tree that's going to provide a lot of shade. Today, leaves aren't on the tree right now, but you can imagine on a hot day, this is the place that you would want to be. White oaks are also fantastic urban species because they're a native species with a lot of wildlife value. When you think about our urban areas, urban expansion, development, and the role that green corridors or wildlife corridors play in that matrix, having species like white oaks is really important for helping facilitate our native fauna in Connecticut. And then the other reason I think white oaks are really important in an urban context is because they are a native tree. They are both ecologically and culturally significant for us in Connecticut. And so in an urban environment, the trees in your neighborhood might be your primary exposure to nature. Trees can connect people to the cultural and the ecological heritage of our state is so important for fostering that love and connection of nature.
I might just add that they're very storm damage resistant, so they last a really long time. Like you mentioned, they were very long-lived, and it's because of their strength, they're less likely to shed branches.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely important.
Why don't you tell us, how do we get more of that oak habitat?
So I think the most important thing if you're thinking about planting an oak in an urban area is making sure you're planting it in the right space. You can see the charter oak behind us. This is a big tree. It needs a lot of space. And so some of those utility conflicts that you mentioned arise when we plant a tree that's too large in a space that is too small. So the first step to success is identifying an appropriate space to plant your oak. The second really important piece, and this pertains not just to oaks, but all trees that are planted in an urban environment, is to invest a lot of care early in the life cycle that will pay off dividends as the tree ages. So at Deep Forestry, we recommend weekly watering for newly planted trees, 10 to 20 gallons for the first 3 years after it's been planted. We recommend light mulch layers around the trees. That helps retain some soil moisture. It reduces competition from weeds or from turf. And it's also really crucial for protecting from mechanical damage if someone's coming through with a mower or a weed whacker. And then the other really important piece of that kind of upfront investment is structural pruning throughout the tree's life cycle. It's much easier to prune a tree when it's younger and smaller, and that early intervention can result in a much stronger structural tree so that down the road we're not running into some of the challenges and issues with trees getting into power lines or having faulty limbs that can cause a lot of negative perceptions around trees.
Like people, trees are mourned when they're gone, and sometimes the community finds a way to hold on to them.
The place where I'm sitting is a piece of sculpture that was made here at Bushnell Park in Hartford at a time when one of the offspring or scions of the original charter oak, which had been planted here, died. In order to recognize that tree and honor it, an artist was commissioned to carve this throne from the trunk of the tree when it was salvaged. And the throne will be here for a good long time because this white oak is very decay resistant, and people are taking care of it and so forth and so on. One of the interesting things that they found was that when they went to remove the tree, it was hollow on the inside, just like the charter oak, the original charter oak. And come to find out, the state has been hiding documents in this tree for years and years and years. What do you think? Is that a good use for the tree?
I don't know about that, but I do think that projects like this are really cool and do speak to that attachment that people form to the trees in their neighborhood. When this tree had to come down, people were really upset about it, and this was suggested as a way to honor the important contribution this tree had made to Bushnell Park and this community and its cultural heritage. And like you say, it's a nice lasting landmark that'll be in the park.
The same qualities that make a white oak a cornerstone of the forest, its density, its resistance to rot, its structural strength, have made it equally indispensable to the people who work with wood. In Connecticut, that relationship between tree and trade goes back centuries.
My name is Brendan Harris, and this is Parkerville Wood Products in Manchester, Connecticut. We are a custom millwork manufacturer and a boutique retail lumber yard. We make custom millwork and woodworking for commercial and residential clients all throughout Connecticut. White oak is one of the most popular species that we work with, both with our retail customers and our commercial accounts. Today, primarily what we use white oak for is a lot of paneling. It's very common in commercial spaces. White oak is sawn primarily in 3 different ways: plain sawn, quarter sawn, and rift sawn. So rift sawn and quarter sawn white oak are very trendy right now with paneling in commercial spaces. You see it a lot in residential kitchens today as well. And outside of that, we make lots of countertops. It's used a lot in doors and trim. And again, in exterior applications where durability is important. It can take a lot of wear, so if there's applications you're using wood that might have high wear, it's also really good in those applications as well. White oak is certainly most desirable in an FAS or a premium grade, so material that's been graded out for knots and other defects. So there is still a very high demand for that product, both in the United States and abroad. So today, there's a large amount of premium white oak that is exported outside of the United States. White oak is very in demand abroad. A lot of white oak in the United States is exported specifically to Asia.
Welcome to the state of Connecticut, Deep Portland Sawmill. My name is Jim Moore, and I'm the sawyer for the state of Connecticut. White oak is a valuable hardwood. It's grown locally here naturally in the state forests of Connecticut. It's a prized woodworking species because of its typical growth is predictable. In the commercial market, the northwestern part of Connecticut grows some of the best oak hardwood in the world. It's shipped all over. Some of our larger commercial sawmills in the state do ship it internationally. A lot of our smaller niche sawmills in the state will keep it locally. They may be making tongue and groove flooring with it or furniture grade lumber for cabinetry and that sort of thing.
Unlike most other domestic hardwood species, it lasts very well outside. There's domestic softwood species that do well outside, but white oak, as far as hardwoods, is really the king of exterior use. It is also amongst the hardest domestic species outside of hickory and pecan and some varieties of maple. White oak is the hardest species that grows in the United States. It is one of the most durable and hardwoods that we work with. It's excellent in both interior and exterior applications. It's used in a wide variety of cabinetry, paneling, furniture building, boat building, flooring, and barrel making as well for spirits and wine.
It's strong. It has that ability to be used for cooperage, to hold moisture. The ability of white oak and the cell structure to hold water or other fluids made it ideal for cooperage. It really does stand up to the test of time.
Merchant vessels carried Connecticut livestock and timber to the Caribbean. Fishing schooners hauled cod across the North Atlantic. And whaling ships made New London one of the largest whaling ports in the world. Ships that helped a fledgling colony become something more. Some of those vessels are still afloat today, thanks to the white oak and skilled shipwrights.
We've come to the Henry B. DuPont Restoration Shipyard at Mystic Seaport, and we're talking with Walter Ansell about the use of white oak and some of the shipbuilding projects.
Well, welcome. Great to have you here, Tom. We buy a lot of Connecticut white oak. This is our staging area, and we like to sort of see it as a tree-to-sea operation. We prefer to buy the timbers in the log and do the milling ourselves. We have 2 sawmills on the property, and primarily for 19th century ship restoration, we're looking for frames and planking, and then on a lesser extent, keels, which are the backbones of the ship. The frames of the ship would be the ribs, and the planking, the hull skin.
I see.
And we look for Quercus alba, white oak in Connecticut all the time. We kind of look for two different forms. One is the wolf tree, which is pasture oak. That's where the tree grows sideways as much as it grows up, so that we can get crooks. The frames are often curved. And then the forest trees, which compete with other trees and grow up straight and tall. And I've been buying timber for the museum for about almost 20 years now. And it's one of the parts of the job I really enjoy.
Well,
I like going out with foresters and loggers, and I like to take plans of the ship and show them. And often it has a lot more meaning for them to see the timber go to maritime preservation. I recently retired as director of the shipyard, but I'm a second generation shipwright, and did that for about 30 years. Did an awful lot of timber buying white oak for projects, and really it started when I was in high school. My father was a boat builder and shipwright. My daughter's the third generation to be involved in it too. And I've got a special affinity for Connecticut grown white oak.
You must talk to a lot of loggers and foresters and sawmill operators about the needs that you have for white oak in particular and other species as well.
Absolutely, we do. And they seem to really fall in love with the ship restoration projects, which makes it a lot easier. Timber becomes more special when they can send it to us. White oak is our primary timber that we cut.
Mm-hmm.
The L.A. Dutton, our 1921 Gloucester fishing schooner, we got National Parks grant to buy over 100 white oak trees that we got from a farm in Sterling, Connecticut. Pretty much by the end of the 19th century, the timber had all been cut and harvested and burned, but now it's come back.
Yep.
And really the trees are quite prime and of a good size that we can use for chips now.
Sure. Sure.
So we got from this gentleman over 100 logs, which was tremendous.
That's great. That's great. Now, those will all be processed here into ribs and planking and things to restore this.
That's correct.
This ship.
We have a couple of prime examples here. Two beautiful cants of Connecticut white oak. We've left a little bit of bark and sapwood on the corners so that when the patterns are put on there, they can utilize the maximum amount of timber in the log. Here we've got a knot that we consider in shipbuilding a healthy knot because it's not black, you don't see any rot. And as far as longevity, that's no threat. This is more of a black knot right here. We try to avoid those, but that one's small enough that we could just bore it out and plug it. What do you think of these pieces?
Oh, these are lovely pieces. There'll be some nice planks come out of those. Absolutely.
So Tom, we've got a ship's bandsaw right here that we were talking about earlier, for mostly designed for sawing out the ship's frames or the skeleton. And the blade will tilt 45 degrees in each direction. And the amazing thing about this tool is you can saw a compound bevel. So if you think about a ship being very bluff at the deck and fine at the waterline,
I see.
The
Okay.
frames that are all in the forward part of the ship have a twist like a propeller blade.
Okay.
So to make that twist and cut, you push the timber through the saw and you change the bevel as you're sawing.
As it cuts.
Yes.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Compound bevel cutting machine. It's got a 25-foot blade and built by Fay & Egan, and it's an absolutely tremendous machine. We've got two of them. We've got another one on standby of the big size, and then we've got a smaller one in our main shipyard shop.
What fascinates me is that you describe changing that bevel as you go, and I can see somebody programming that into a computerized machine, but
this machine, you have to have somebody who has just the right touch to be able to change that at the right rate as the piece passes through.
Absolutely. You're talking about coordination between the speed of the person pushing the timber through and the bevel changer, because the bevel has to be correct at a specific spot on the timber. The pieces often can weigh up to 300 to 500 pounds.
Yeah.
So you need a way to hold the tail end.
Yeah.
And with this track right here, we can steer it as we go through. And it takes at least 3 or 4 people to do the cutting operation on the bigger timbers.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's a physically pretty demanding thing to do.
Wow.
So.
Yeah.
Despite all that white oaks have given to wildlife, history, and the communities who shape it into ships, floors, and furniture, its future in Connecticut is not guaranteed. To grow, white oaks require a little help.
There's a time in the springtime when the forest floor receives a lot of warm sunlight before the leaves on the upper canopy trees emerge fully. There's a greening of the understory here. We see the trout lilies, we see a number of other spring ephemerals, and the shrubs and the small trees in the subcanopy, or the understory, if you will, begin to send their leaves out. And we're standing at a location at Spring Hill on UConn Forest, where we have a nice example of the challenges that are presented with trying to manage for oak, trying to grow oak trees from seedlings. We have a great big, tall white oak tree here beside me, a tree that produces a lot of acorns very reliably, and the acorns don't have any problem with germinating. They come to the ground, they send out a root radical, and they germinate, and they're ready to go. But also, in this stand, we have lots of foliage in the subcanopy here. Beside me are 2, 3, 4 ironwood trees, ironwood meaning hop hornbeam trees. We have witch hazel, and we have sweet pepper bush, we have spice bush, we have yellow birch, maple leaf viburnum, and a variety of other plants and shrubs that grow perfectly well in the shade. And they produce their own shade in turn. But down here near the ground, we have oak seedlings that are grown up from acorns, and they're just beginning to send their leaves out. They look a little pinkish this time of year, and there's a lot of them. And they're taking advantage of what sunlight they get while the leaves aren't on the upper canopy. A lot of these seedlings have also been browsed by the deer. You can see that the terminal buds are missing, and some side bud is taking over to become the new terminal. This one in particular is a nice example. The leader is dead, and a side branch is taking over to become the leader. These seedlings get browsed year after year after year. The deer come along in the wintertime and eat the buds off. The buds are nourishing to them in the wintertime. And so between the shade that occurs in the summertime and the deer browse that occurs in the wintertime, the oak seedlings find it very challenging to try to develop and grow and gain any height. And if we want to grow oak seedlings, if that's our goal, is to grow oak seedlings, then we need to do something about controlling the shade and controlling the deer browse. This fairly sunny area at Spring Hill is an area where a harvest was conducted in 2016. The idea was to create an irregular canopy with gaps that would allow the sunlight to come in and bring along some of the oak regeneration that was already here. There were oak seedlings already on the ground, much like what we saw in the other part of the woods. And the idea was to bring them some sunlight and to advance them, if you will, to sapling size, and hopefully they would gain some height to be protected from deer browse. The plan was to come back in a few years and expand the gaps, in the canopy a little bit more and let more light in, bring more seedlings along. As it turns out, mortality of oak trees as a result of the spongy moth defoliations and other pathogens in 2018, we lost a lot of the oak trees that were left behind. In effect, the spongy moth did my second treatment for me about 10 years too early. So as it stands, there's lots of light in this stand. And as you can see over here, to my left, there's a very dense stand of sapling-sized material. That's a lot of it is birch. There's some beech. There's some maple, and there are some oak seedlings or oak saplings in there as well. Very dense, great bird habitat, great wildlife habitat. We were curious as to just how many oaks we might find in a place like that. So off here to my left, we cut everything that wasn't an oak tree. And the count was such that on 1/10 of an acre, I had about 70 seedlings. And that would add up to about 700 per acre. By the time they're mature trees, we would expect to have 60 or 70 per acre. 90% of these would lose the competition battle anyway. What I need to do is protect about 1/10 of them from the deer if I want to help them gain height over this other vegetation that's growing here. And so we have a little bit of a trial of different methods for protecting the seedlings from deer browse here at Spring Hill to see what might work that a typical landowner might be able to accomplish on their own. Here on this experimental plot, we have erected some artificial deer protection defenses. We didn't fence off the entire area. You would need to put a very substantial fence that's 8 feet tall in order to protect every seedling that's out here. Instead, we've used some snow fencing and some simple stakes and identified 8 or 10 seedlings to protect from the deer. Now the deer will browse the rest of them. In fact, this one here where the branch is sticking out of the fence has been browsed, but everything inside the fence hasn't been browsed and is growing in height a little bit more rapidly than everything else. And so this sort of very simple device needs to be maintained somewhat once or twice a year and make sure they're intact. But this can take a seedling that's a foot tall or 2 feet tall and give it some protection from the deer until it gets to be 4 feet or 5 feet tall, and it'll be tall enough to be able to compete with the deer on its own. On this experimental plot, rather than cut all of the brush and just release the oak seedlings, we identified certain selected seedlings and cut the brush just around them. And we took that brush and we piled it up in a way that would make it annoying for the deer to try to browse this seedling. And we were able to gain some very good height on these seedlings. Now the brush is only a temporary measure because it decays, but it buys this seedling enough time to gain in some height. The deer won't bother with it because they have other ones that they can browse. You can see some of these shorter ones that have been browsed repeatedly. And so, cutting the brush and piling it around the selected seedling that you want to grow is a good way to protect it from the deer, at least temporarily.
The white oak has been quietly present through everything. The wildlife that depend on its acorns, the ships that carried a new nation's goods across the Atlantic, the history hidden in its hollow. It has always been part of something larger, a forest, a pasture, a shipyard, a park, a neighborhood. The people in this film have spent their lives in relationship with this tree as scientists, stewards, craftspeople, and neighbors. Now, a new generation is learning what that relationship looks like from the very beginning. The white oak does not grow on its own. It needs protection when it's small, room when it's young, and people willing to think beyond their own lifetimes. That's the kind of patience this tree asks of us, and the kind of legacy it offers in return.